Hello, this is Coach Tim Campbell, and I'm your host for the Self-Made is a Myth show, where we are talking to successful business owners to hear their stories of their journey to building their business. And because we know that achieving success in business is not something that we can do on our own, we're taking some time to recognize the folks who have helped us to excel. Today, I'm excited to have a fellow business owner from Indiana with us today. My guest started programming at the age of 13. In his downtime, he enjoys programming as well as stock trading automation, and he is most proud of his children. It's my pleasure to welcome Brian to the show today. Hello, Brian.
How are you, Tim?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, hey, let's start with having you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit of your personal story, like where you live, about your family, and some of your hobbies.
Yeah, yeah. I'm living in Indiana these days, but I was really born upstate New York and retained sort of, some of that East Coast time and heritage until I really grew up, had kids, and moved out to Indiana, where I've spent probably the last 15, 20 years or so. I don't have I have the normal tech geek hobbies, right? Like I code in my free time. I do occasionally play a little bit of Minecraft, best game ever made. Short man. But fascinating games like that. But I'll spend as much time as I can though, traveling or hiking different areas, etc., trying to get unplugged, wherever I can get the opportunity to really do something like that. And that could be a beach or a mountain, but
Nice.
try to enjoy those things as well.
Yeah. Fantastic. And so are you here by yourself, or any family move here with you?
My wife and three sons are here, but my kids are pretty much grown,
Mhm.
and so it's pretty much almost an empty nest at the moment.
Fantastic. Awesome. Hey, Brian, is there a funny story that your family likes to tell about you that you'd be willing to share with us today?
Uh, you know, there are stories that my mother tells, and better than I do, if you will. My wife enjoys them much more than I do, probably.
Those sound
One
perfect.
exactly. Oh God, one of her favorites is when I was maybe like 5, my mom wanted to take me to the store, and I didn't want to go.
Mhm.
And ever the negotiator, I told her and promised her, as I drew a line apparently with my foot on the ground, that I wouldn't cross that line, I wouldn't draw on the walls, and I wouldn't drink the poison under the counter. Right, I'm still like a Gen Xer. We still left poison under the counters apparently in my growing up. So that's what youth was for Gen Xers.
That's
But she
awesome.
didn't leave me home alone. So, but
She
I
did
had
or didn't?
she did not. I had to
Okay,
go.
it
I
didn't
had
work.
I had to not at 5, right? But
Nice.
still
Well,
still some responsibility at that point.
well, tell us, Brian, how the business came about. I know you've had a few different businesses. At what point did you have the confidence that you could run your own business?
That's a fun that is actually uh sort of an odd sort of question. I'm not sure that moment existed, right? In some sort of moment, because I think I was so fed up with the status quo in corporate,
Mm,
and I realized I was sort of off mission. I had always known I was going to run a software company, and I was trying to learn as much as I could about doing that. And I was in a mode where I was raising kids, paying bills, stuff
mm,
that people do, and that corporate environment was so toxic,
mm.
right? And they wanted to do a project that was going to be miserable and fail. So they were going to spend millions of dollars wasted to fail. I let them know it was going to be wasted and fail. And, they were not interested in my opinion. And, we parted ways, and I had no choice,
Mm,
right? but to sort of make that leap of faith. And I'm
Right.
not sure I'd call that confidence. Like you're sitting there with no choices, bills still have to be paid, and you're deciding like this is the moment where I've had
Yeah.
it, and I'm going to make this thing work no matter what happens. And sort of, that's maybe an odd type of confidence, but it's certainly conviction.
Sure, right? Well, I appreciate you sharing that because, um, there can be a misunderstanding of the posts that people put on social media where it makes it sound like, right, that everybody's confident, everybody's got it all together, and the hundreds of business owners that I've spoken to, that's really not the case. So I thank you for being transparent and sharing that with folks.
Yeah. Social media looks quite different than reality in most cases.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, Brian, tell us a little bit more about the company that you're building now.
Yeah, I have a couple interests right now. I think the prime business that we're still moving forward is Perceivant, which is a great company, but we've hired a president to run that company. He's fantastic. And, like I always encourage people, like you need to hire people who you believe will do a better job than you,
Mm,
right? Like these are the things you're trying to do. You're trying to build a team not of people who won't do as good as you, but that you really trust will do better things than you. And I think in Perceiving, we've hired a president that can do quite a bit better job and have a greater passion for what's happening there than than what I have at this time. And I'm very excited about that. And I've started a few new ventures. One with automated stock trading, which is
mhm.
facing its own challenges. That's sort of like the ikigai of my passion set.
Uh,
And then yeah, I'm working on a new venture called Dine Tribe, which will help groups of diners or people who want to eat out or share a drink or a meal together find a really good place to do that, to meet and to do that. And I think sadly that is a terribly unsolved problem, and we all eat like every day, but maybe we go out once a week. We want it to be reliably good, and we
right.
want it to be good for the entire group. And for anyone who plans in that group, it can be challenging. We'd like to make it easier. So,
Amen to that. So
yeah.
that is so relevant right now. We went out last night before the Colts game, and the experience was terrible. The food was late, and we missed the kickoff, and it's like, oh my goodness! And despite the fact that we had a reservation and we were there, you know, 2.5 hours ahead of time, so there should have been no reason that we would be late for the game. So I
Ah,
like what you're doing. That sounds like you needed that app.
right, right. And groups are tough because people have so many variations on eating and drinking constraints today. We don't do a good job of recommending anything other in the world today than the sort of the highest advertising bidder.
Mm,
Seems to be what gets the most recommendations today. So
very cool.
challenging at best.
So I know it's still you're working on it, but is there a launch date? What's the is there any can you share anything, or is it all still
It's
confidential?
already putting the pressure on. No, I think we would like to in Q2 be in some form of beta for
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
It's in an early fundraising and technology implementation phase.
Very cool.
But you have to have certain number of unreasonable deadlines, and
Sure.
technology, if left on its own, will be perfected in perpetuity.
Yeah.
So we've really got to get something high quality, but probably not what you'd be comfortable with, right? You got to feel a little uncomfortable about
Yeah.
it, and
Yeah.
then you maybe hit the right spot. So
Awesome. Well,
yeah, challenge
so
nonetheless.
exciting. Congratulations. Uh, Brian, share a story where someone pushed you or inspired you that you could do it, even though maybe you thought you couldn't, and the impact that that person had on you.
Yeah, probably had a couple. I think the the great thing for me has been being lucky enough to have amazing mentors all along the way. And I think you end up in these situations where you want to wonder about what you can do or how to do something. So if you start from where I was, I always wanted to run a software business
Hmm.
and knew that. I knew that was what I needed to do. I knew that's what I would be happy doing, and I needed to acquire skills and knowledge to solve some of those problems. And those businesses, you just can't start them if you don't know anything about business. You can't start a business
Right.
problem, right? It's like, oh, okay, I could do things like, even then, write stock tracking apps, not you know as useful given my stock trading knowledge at the time,
Mm,
which was still quite limited. um, but even my very first job I took was at a small software company, right? It's an IBM Global Services partner. And I got to work on IBM Global Services projects.
mm.
And I would work nights and weekends anytime I could to just follow the owner around anytime he would give me. And I just followed him around. I pulled wire through walls, had nothing to do with a future career job, but I wanted to see, like, what does this guy do? What does he think about in his free time? Why is he pulling wire? Why am I here with him on Saturday? Doing this? Is this helpful? Well, it really instilled sort of that mentality that as owner, all the glorious jobs weren't gonna just land upon me. Right? Like, literally taking out trash,
Yeah.
pulling wire through walls was gonna be one of the jobs that I would do if it meant that I could sort of preserve the productivity of my team and what
Right,
they were doing. And he certainly wasn't going to pull someone off of a billable project to do some of these
right.
other things. He was doing them, himself. And I realized that a lot of these things, from that, weren't complicated necessarily. They weren't amazing. You don't give awards to people for taking out the trash, right? Because anyone can do it. But
Maybe you should.
right. I mean, we should. I just think, like, all of these things. But he was amazingly inspirational in that regard. Also, just career wise, right? He spent time on little things, how I acted professionally with clients, how I dressed, what I thought about, how to focus on things that were positive, or be persistent, or continue to work through challenges. I didn't know. I thought I knew a lot. I knew nothing. I learned quickly how little I knew. And I think, through that, you learned a lot about how you could learn, do hard work, and you know you could kind of see yourself saying, okay, I can see myself doing that job in the future, right? And I think that was inspiring. It did push me always to do more things, and that just never let up. And I think, I sometimes took jobs that maybe weren't the highest paying
Mhm.
or didn't look quite right, just so I could work with the people that I wanted to learn stuff from.
That's awesome, yeah. What's
And
that business owner's name that, you were just describing?
Larry Howe.
Okay.
He was it was in Boston, actually. He's a great guy. Usually don't like to name too many many people. They don't want to necessarily also be named, but he was extremely helpful to me.
That's
And
awesome.
obviously, that's your first job. It leaves an impression.
Mhm.
And you know he's a great individual.
I like how generous he was, with his time to mentor you and train you and guide and direct you and let you see the full picture so that you could have that perspective. That's amazing, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I just think that most of the people, at least in my experience, have been very open.
Mhm.
In the I would say, um, startup small business world. In the corporate world, right, extremely opposite. I've been
Right?
lucky to have decent mentors there as well. But there is an attitude of abundance
Mm,
in the startup world. in the small business world, even back then. But in the corporate world, there's such a mentality of scarcity.
Yeah.
Everything is scarce
Yes.
in that environment, and
Yes.
sort of the antithesis of where I'd want to be.
Even little things like planning, right? You're always told in the corporate world, under promise and over deliver, because we don't want to set ourselves up for failure and not get our bonus. That's one of the things that I have to deprogram with my clients is no, think big, right? Put a stretch goal out there. If you don't achieve it, that's okay, because what you do achieve is going to be bigger than your conservative version, that you were taught in the corporate world to plan.
Absolutely. I talked to our team about failure, just the other day. Like, if we're not failing, we're just doing this wrong.
Mm,
And, it's sort of like a shock to their system,
yeah.
right? You're like, wait, why would we want to do that? Well, you have to do that. Like, we're going to set goals that may be irrational. We're going to reward you greatly if we reach them.
Yeah.
Um, but on some level, we have to, fail quite a few.
Yeah.
I think, even this was recent. I saw Elon kind of do a piece where they were talking about, blowing up engines faster. And they're just trying to produce
Right.
some
Yeah.
cycle times, and we're blowing up a lot of them, but we're blowing them up faster.
Yep.
And cycle time is everything.
Yes,
And
indeed.
so
Yeah.
you gotta be comfortable with some level of failure.
You said the fail forward. That our founder has a saying that I like. Says he never fails. He either succeeds or he learns. And I thought that's just a great way of explaining failures, right? It's not failing, it's I'm learning so that I can do it better the next time.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and some
speaking of
some
learning,
trials.
Brian, what's your biggest learning as a business owner?
You have to love this stuff.
Hmm.
That's number one, right? Because it's really hard. It's not just sort of hard. It's really, really hard. Uh, and you know, just because you're positive and you sort of think good things will happen, they don't always happen.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean they will happen. So more than likely, after 20 years now of doing this, bad things just happen. Black swan events will happen, and you need to be ready for that.
Hmm.
Um, I think one of the things I learned that I wasn't necessarily sure I was going to learn was that I'm in sales,
Yeah. Oh,
right? And
yes.
as a
Yeah.
programming sort of math focused individual, the realization that I'm in sales, or certainly was in sales, was somewhat of a shock, even to myself. But if you want to run a business, you're in sales,
Yeah.
and you better come to grips with that,
Yes.
really, really soon, because sales is king.
Yeah.
I think, but I've learned I've learned more than I've asked for or wanted to learn. I think at the moment, so
Fantastic.
continues, and it continues.
Your sales comment, the reason I'm laughing so much is because I had that similar conversation with my wife when I was contemplating going out on my own, and she's like, "Tim, you don't like sales. You're not gonna." And I'm like, "It's not sales. It's gonna be great." And then
It's chaos.
in the first in the first couple years, when it's, to your point, when it's really hard and right, and and I was not feeling at my best, she's like, "I told you you weren't gonna like sales."
Right, right. Oh man, we have been days away from different entities, away from no cash, and you have to close something or have to collect something, or that's the farthest place from data analytics you could ever
Right?
imagine, right? Because the data side of me says, we sent an invoice, it was due in 14 days, why didn't they pay it?
Yeah.
The person
Right.
wouldn't pay their bill. Well,
Uh-huh.
turns out a few, quite a few.
Yeah. So what's been helpful for me is just the switching of my mindset. So it's not sales. I'm professionally helping people to make a decision that's right for them. Right. And now it's like, oh my goodness, I can do that.
Right, right. I like that much better. Yeah.
So Brian, we know that business success doesn't happen in isolation. So tell us about your biggest challenge during the years, and maybe a fellow business owner that came alongside you to help you get through that.
Yeah, it's probably not too uncommon now to hear that COVID has been companies' biggest challenges. I don't think that's any different for us. I think we thought we would have a great opportunity to take advantage of COVID at Perceivant, being that we were a digital learning platform, and there has been some good side benefits of that over time. However, colleges close their doors going into many summer programs,
Mm,
and so um, that's shocking. It's unplanned. It's a black swan event that you just can't think about. So you can't imagine colleges just canceling their summer classes in April,
right,
just telling students to go home. We're not going to take your money. If you had asked if I thought schools would ever do that just 6 months earlier, I'd say no way. They're
right,
not going to forego all the planning, all the revenue. Colleges don't move that fast. What
right.
could make that happen? Well, COVID.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of business owners, and myself included, um, sort of shared stories and opportunities about how we were going to get through that time. But, for us, our lead investor, who's also owned, several businesses, really stood by us,
Mm,
knew that the mission was good, worked with us, um, to continue through that struggling period, not only just from financial perspective, but how to restructure, how to, mentally and emotionally get back up
right.
from, you know, 50% revenue losses,
Hmm.
right? All of a sudden. So it's shock to the system.
Sure.
And I think, you need sort of some folks who have been through some black swan events and are in a situation to help you through that. But certainly without them, uh, we wouldn't have made it through. And it's a challenge. It's a
Yeah.
challenge for a lot, and a lot didn't make it through.
Yes, the very true. Yeah, so I'm just thankful that that you had that um, opportunity, that you had that support and that understanding, and because to your point, many didn't. So, uh,
Right.
so very awesome that you had already built that, that infrastructure and had people on your that had your back and was willing to work through it with you. So, congratulations. If
Yeah.
if I asked you to pick 3 people, Brian, in your business owner journey that you're most grateful for being there for you, that has helped you with your business growth, who are those 3 people and how did they help you?
Yeah. Yeah. Certainly the investors we just talked about.
Mhm.
There was three people at that. It's a family run shop. Those three, I'll count that as one. But I mean, without them, I think we would struggle immensely.
Mm.
Um, they've been, you know, patient, kind, and also, you know, I find they push you the most,
Yeah,
which is great.
yeah.
Certainly my wife, who has endured 10 years, uh, crazy.
What's
Uh,
your wife's name?
Jennifer,
Okay.
Jennifer. And, you know, there can be a certain number of long hours or irrational work moments. And having a spouse that's supporting you and on your side is insanely helpful to keeping things, structured and moving forward the right way. And then, if you go really back, we had a couple of angel investors, one in particular who wrote the very first check, and said they would write it on a handshake. Of course, we did paperwork,
Yeah.
but uh, they said, look, if we didn't think we could write this check on a handshake, we wouldn't write it.
Mm,
And they just had a belief in me and the business partner at the time that it made it possible,
mhm.
but it also made you realize that individuals like that who are sort of paying it forward, um, really sort of change the course of how everything works, and sort of also set this bar like, okay, we got to make this work. We're going to have to pay them back. Like
Right?
this has to happen. Uh, but yeah, certainly that first sort of check of size, right? 6-figure size, you know, it's meaningful, and
Yeah.
it's hard to not be grateful to someone who has put that kind of faith in you.
Wow, I'm just in awe about, the generosity, and then to your point, the confidence that that generosity gives, and also you alluded to it, also that burden or that responsibility, right? Of these people trusted in us, and so we've got to, pay it back, and make sure we do. Nothing's guaranteed, as you already mentioned, right,
Right.
with the black swan events, but doing everything that you are capable of to honor that commitment. And so, yeah, congratulations. That's an awesome story. Thank you for sharing. So, as you think about the next 3 to 5 years, what's the biggest challenge or challenges that you see that you're going to face in getting to your goals? And who are the types of people that you're going to need to help you solve those challenges?
Yeah, you know, if we go back 20 years, which is hard to say, you're asking what the next 3 to 5. But if you go back 20 years, I had a very good economic picture of what the world looked like through 2020 to 2022,
Mhm.
surprisingly. Um, and I mean a very good picture. So I felt very confident in what the world looked like through that time period, even into the COVID event, right? So like we had expected a downturn in 2020 in some aggressive way, not knowing the trigger would be COVID,
Sure.
but had planned for that. I think what's challenging right now is an economy that is so uncertain
Mm,
that it is hard to see.
right.
And we are living in a time, in a period where um, I think the next 2 years is going to be rough. We're in, I think, a recession right now. I know that's controversial on some level. I don't know why it's controversial. It's just true is. But I think 2023 is going to be rough economy. 2024, I'm hopeful and positive that 2024 can turn that around. So
Mm,
if you're looking at a 3 to 5 year challenge in a bad economy into the next year, what types of things do you need to do to survive next year to get to those 3 to 5 years? And,
right.
and what does that look like? And what type of talent and what type of economic goals can you really set in what I expect will be a very challenging economy for people in the next 12 months. So I think those things are really challenging, and probably if you're looking at a consumer business or a stock trading business, a stock market that's in 30% declines and extreme uncertainty is it's an opportunity
Sure.
for sure, but it's also a challenge,
Yeah.
right? Raising investment when investments are extremely challenged and people are losing billions in some cases, as you've
Hmm.
seen with some of the tech investment collapse, like in coin, right? FTX, etc.
Yeah.
I think those environments create moments where um, capital doesn't free up or flow as freely as it might have.
Mm,
Valuations, I think, will come under intense and scrutiny. Not that they shouldn't. They probably should have before,
sure.
and they're probably going to in the future. So I think that those economic challenges are gonna drive a lot of pressure on what happens over the next 24 months. And companies, there's probably a few that don't make it out of that window as well. And then like any time period, I think it's going to be hard to find the technical talent and sales talent. Like it's always,
Right.
there's never been a time in my life where I go, oh, we just have an abundance of the best salespeople. They're just falling off of trees. It's, that has never been a statement. I think that's always a challenge. You need to find the people that can close those deals and move the products that you're needing to move.
Mhm.
And those are really unique, individuals. And tech talent is always challenging. I mean, think about, I was trying to think about in terms of stock trading, who I could talk to about one of the problems I was trying to solve. I have zero people in my Rolodex.
Mm,
Zero. I have to figure out the right quant trader, in Indiana. I don't, it's not against Indiana, but it's not a high quant trading environment, right?
sure.
So you can't just network your way into some other quant trader that has tried to solve, sort of one of these problems I'm trying to solve.
Yeah.
So how do you even find that person? These are sort of edge talent cases. I'm not talking about, sort of some of the more mainstream just tech talent, but
Sure.
that type of edge talent that's high in those data science categories, I think will be still challenging to find the right people, despite all of our sort of collective efforts to get programs and schooling and boot camps and college programs churning out students. Um, Finding those right individuals that can solve those problems in a rational way, I think will still be really challenging.
Yeah, there's definitely a big concern with the recession. I agree. We're there already, and we don't know how long it's going to be and what the true impact's going to be. And but what we do know, at least from COVID, is the folks who sort of ducked their head in the sand and said this is just going to be a couple months and pass over, right, did not do very well versus those who, like you were saying, say, hey, we know it's here. We're going to face it head on. We're going to pivot. We're going to adjust. We're going to figure this out. Those businesses actually came out the other end in a much healthier position than where they were going into COVID. So I appreciate what you're saying in terms of eyes wide open. Right,
Yeah,
let's hit it face on and work our way through it.
yeah, absolutely. It's not something to be ignored. And I think in terms of like my paradigm of thinking through it at the moment, in terms of maybe a stock market in general, um, with such great uncertainty in the market, maybe there is more openness to a different way
Mm.
to participate if we can bring that solution to market that is mired in regulatory and other legal constraints right now. But I think that uncertainty through is going to last for a certain period of time,
Right.
and it's going to be exciting to see though. There are no boring days in the stock market for the last 3 to 4 months. I'll tell you
Right.
that. So
So Jim Rohn said that we become the average of the five people that we spend the most time with. So as you think about this, what advice do you have for business owners who are trying to do it on their own?
first, that seems like a ridiculous question to me. Like I don't, and I know you mean it in a genuine way, but if I think about a business owner who's trying to do it on their own, I think of someone who is unemployed or self-employed,
Mm,
and that's not a business. And
right.
and and, and so I sort of just I struggle with that on and on some level, like what kind of business are we talking about? On the other hand, I do have that stock ending that I talked about, where I'm the primary person who does all the work.
Mm,
But even in an effort to not do that alone, I found a handful of individuals who I have but we don't let them code or do anything like that, but
mm,
they participate to keep you sort of sane and honest. Your brain, the human brain, has a tendency to not be able to check itself very well,
mm.
and so I could easily lie to myself about my performance, if you will.
Right.
Right? I cancel out the bad days, keep the good days. Your brain can trick you immensely. And
Yes,
so, without having some outside check and balance, even in that entity where those individuals are participating really only at a check and balance level,
sure.
right? But it's just required.
Yeah.
It's impossible. If I think about one of the early businesses we started, you know, I partnered with someone who was just excellent at sales, just just fantastic.
Right.
And so we knew, hey, I've got the pieces that I'm doing and the skill sets that I have that are going really well that are just as required, but you're going to do this stuff that I'm not that good at.
Right.
And yeah, I think statistically, if you look at the successful outcomes of businesses, partnerships always do better than sole owners.
Mm.
And there's just a reason for that. You just no one person has 100%
Right.
of the high skills needed to compete. And I would say today it's even harder. It's even harder. So, going it alone just again sounds more like, I'm self-employed.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's
Sure.
okay.
Yeah.
There's risk in that, for sure, and it can always lead to other things. But I think when it leads to those other things, what you're going to find is it leads to enabling other people to work with you and participate and grow this to something that is, bigger than what one person can do. So, maybe it takes a little bit longer, but you have to find those checks and balances, and those other folks that um, you know cover your gaps, if you will, your skill gaps. And then, everybody has a bad day and a good day, right? And hopefully,
For sure.
whoever you're working with, their cycle is the opposite of yours, right? Like,
Yes.
sort of like, occasionally be great if they meet, but they don't always do that.
So, Brian, you've been blessed with some incredible people, it sounds like, who have helped you along on your journey. If they were all on the show here today, what would you want to say to them?
You're crazy. No. Uh, yeah, I think, try to not wait, but we've say thank you a lot. I think we've tried to realize that most of these things um, could go away sort of almost at any time.
Mm,
All of these things are sort of temporal. They're one black swan event away from not really existing anymore.
mhm.
But I find that most of the people who've been impactful have often believed maybe in me even more than I have. Right? My wife will say that often. I'll try to say to her, "We have this challenge," and she'll just say something like, "Well, they'll just figure it out." Like, well, right. I didn't know. I will not be worried. I will just, I'll just figure that out, obviously. We always do. And it's like, but a lot of those individuals had, faith and confidence in your work, even when you didn't, or more than you have. And it's greatly appreciated. It's how you kind of get, get, get to where you need to be. So thank you is what I would say. But I hope this would not be the first time that you heard thank you. That's all I'd have to. Like, I hope this if anyone heard this would not be the first time.
Fantastic. Well, Brian, it has been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Hopefully, it's helpful in some way. And thanks for your time.
To everyone who tuned in, thanks for listening to the Self Made is a Myth show with your host, Coach Tim Campsell. Be sure to help spread our movement by liking the show and posting about it on your social media. And to join us, go to bemadtogether.com. All right, folks, that's a wrap. Make sure to pay it forward, and I'll see you all next time. Take care.